Hey, Allison, we're asking people a couple questions. Question number one, is it impossible for God to exist?
It's not impossible, but it is extremely unlikely.
Okay. Second question, if I could prove God to your satisfaction, would you worship Him?
I would, but you would need to prove Him to my satisfaction, and the burden of proof would be on you to make a positive support for God's existence, rather than on me to prove a negative.
Okay. Now, as a Christian, it's my position that without God, we can't actually know anything. So, could I go down the avenue and ask you how much you know?
That's a very naughty question. You'll need to narrow it down a bit.
Okay. Out of all the knowledge in the universe, how much do you have, Allison?
An extremely tiny fraction of a percentage.
I probably have less. I'm with you there. Let's pretend for a second that you've got 1% of all the knowledge in the universe.
That would be generous.
Is it possible, out of the 99% of knowledge that you don't have, that something could contradict what you think you do have?
It is possible, but until we can explore that other 99%, we need to work with the tiny 1% that we have.
Okay, but it is possible that the 1% that we have could be wrong?
The 1% that we have could be incomplete.
I'm asking, could it actually be wrong? Could we find something in the 99 that actually contradicts the 1%?
It is possible, but we do not have that 99. We have to work with the little 1% that we have.
Would you agree with this statement? In order to say I know something absolutely, you would have to have all knowledge, because otherwise you could be wrong.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And in order to know something absolutely, basically, you would have to be God. So no one can know anything absolutely.
Well, what if I told you this, Allison? If I said, hey, if I had, and I don't, this is hypothetical, if I had all knowledge and I was never allowed to lie, and I told Allison something, could you believe it to be absolutely true?
I would need to ask you to show your work.
Okay, but on this assumption, I have all knowledge and I'm not allowed to lie, could you trust, in other words, could you know that what I'm telling you is true if I can't lie and I know everything?
I would have a very hard time accepting that you are not allowed to lie.
Well, if that's one of the rules, I mean, whether you accept it or not, that's the rule. I'm not allowed to lie, and I know everything. Could you know whatever I tell you to be true?
Well, you would first need to prove to me how it is impossible for you to lie.
But if I tell you, whatever I tell you, you're going to have to take by faith, right? You're gonna, if I can't lie and I know everything, you're going to have to say, okay, if you can't lie and you know everything, then I can trust you. Could you trust somebody that could not lie and knows everything?
If it could be established that this person was unable to lie and did know everything, then yes, I could trust. But I should not trust anyone who first tells me I cannot lie. If you believe someone who comes to you and tells you I cannot lie, then I'd like to sell you some land in Florida. I hope you understand that.
I do, but we're not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that analogy and say we're not talking about people. We're talking about the God of the Bible, the God that cannot lie and the God that knows everything. If he were to tell us stuff, could we know it to be true?
Well, I'd be really curious as to what form that communication would take.
It could be anything he wants.
So if we were to receive that communication, how would we verify that it is in fact the God of the Bible and not some of our cognitive biases or some kind of hoax?
Well, and that's, I hate to do this, I have to answer that with a question. Is it impossible for the God of the Bible to reveal himself to us in a way that we can know him for certain? Is that an impossibility, no matter what the method?
I don't know that it's an impossibility, but I need first to eliminate possibilities of hoaxes and cognitive biases first.
But in order to do that, you have to actually have knowledge.
Knowledge of what exactly? Where would that knowledge come from?
Exactly. Where does knowledge come from is the question. Because without the God who knows everything and cannot lie, we're forced into a position of saying we don't know anything. Allison, is it possible you could be wrong about everything you think you know?
It's possible, but so far I've had a lot of people trying to convince me that God exists. It's not like I was never religious myself, and yet so far all the evidence I've seen makes a lot more sense without God in the picture.
But we're talking about before we can even get to the evidence that we see, we're talking about knowledge in general. Is it possible? I mean, could you be wrong about everything? Is it possible you don't even know anything? Do you conceive that as a possibility?
I can see that as a possibility about as much as you can see that it's a possibility that you're wrong about your beliefs.
And this is where I know atheists don't like this. I don't conceive that as a possibility. On some things, yes, but when it comes to God's existence, I can't. Because like I said at the very beginning, without God, we wouldn't even have knowledge. We would be forced in the position of saying, I could be wrong, which is what you've just demonstrated.
But we have to go through life with the admission that we could be wrong, because if we cannot admit that we could be wrong, then we will be chasing false certainties. And when, I believe it was a quote from Mark Twain, the problem is not what you don't know, it's what you know that just ain't so. We cannot afford to be constantly chasing the what we know that just ain't so. And that is why uncertainty is a good thing, and faith is dangerous.
Are you certain of that?
I am certain that faith is dangerous, yes.
Are you certain that certainty is not certain?
Certainty is certain, it's just not always right.
Okay, but you're certain that we can't trust certainty, and everything you just said, you're certain about that?
Based on my experiences and what I've learned about the world around me, that is the lesson that keeps on coming up, that certainty is more dangerous than doubt.
One last question, and I appreciate your time. If I could prove God to your satisfaction, would you worship Him?
If you could prove Him to my satisfaction.
Excellent. Allison, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for talking to me.
All right, my friend.
In our fast-paced, ever-changing world, you need solid information that you can trust. Creation Today answers your questions about science and creation from a biblical perspective. Hosts Eric Hovind and Paul Taylor present an energetic, informative program focusing on the truth of Scripture as a foundation for all of science. Tune in each week as we discuss what's going on in creation today and why it matters to you.